This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
You know, I was looking for the Browns press conference stuff, and I saw this quote from Juan Thornhill, and it made me think. This quote said basically, we're actually in a better spot than people think. They just don't get it. Thornhill mentioned how most of Cleveland's losses have come against NFC opponents, and they still have a bulk of their divisional slate remaining. This is Juan Thornhill talking about the Browns' chances to make the playoffs. Now, usually when you're a 2-6 team, your chances to make the playoffs are not great. Usually the odds are below 10%, but every year has different circumstances. Every year plays out a little bit differently, and that means that different things are possible to happen given how that year breaks out. And if there's a year where something weird's going to happen in the AFC, this could be a year. So let's bring up Juan Thornhill's first point, which is the Browns don't have a lot of AFC losses. Most of their losses were against NFC opponents. I believe the entire NFC East, Philadelphia, the Commanders, the New York Giants, and the Cowboys. They lost 4 of their losses are there. Cincinnati is one loss, and I believe they have another AFC loss in there somewhere. So, yeah, the Raiders, they lost to the Raiders. It's another AFC loss. But interestingly enough, if you look at the rankings for the tiebreakers, the Browns are the 11th seed in the AFC. Now, 7 seeds make the playoffs, so the Browns wouldn't be in the playoffs. But of all the 2-win teams that have played 8 games so far, the Cleveland Browns are in the best spot of all of those teams because they win all the tiebreaker. They win the tiebreaker over Las Vegas and New England based on their win percentage in conference games. The division tie was initially used to eliminate the New York Jets. New England wins the break over there. So the Browns' conference record separates them from the other 2-2 teams because if you look at their conference record, they are 500, 2-2, and everybody else is what? 2-4, 2-4, 2-4, 2-4, 1-3. So everybody else is significantly underwater. If you look at the next tier of teams, right, the 2 to 3 win teams that have only played, like Miami has had a bye week already, so they're in the same tier as a 3-win, a 3-5 team, Cincinnati, a 3-5 team. Their conference records are 1-3 and 2-3. So let's say the Browns beat the Chargers and get put into that 3-win tier. They would automatically jump over Cincinnati and jump over Miami because the conference record is the first tiebreaker. That means if the Browns win on Sunday against the Los Angeles Chargers, they not only move the current 7th seed to 4-4, but they would move themselves up to 3-6, which would put them on equal footing, possibly with Cincinnati if they don't win next week, or with Miami if they win next week or lose next week, whatever they do next week, which would mean that they would get a tiebreaker and potentially they can go from the 11th to the 9th seed, which is only 2 spots away from the playoffs. So it isn't crazy based on how these tiebreakers play out for the Cleveland Browns, given the fact that they did not lose a ton of AFC games to get to 2-6, that this thing could swing the Browns' way. Now, realistically, at 2-6, you would have to win out to be a 10-win team. Well, Now, realistically, at 2-6, the best record you can get is 11-6. And to be a 10-win team, you would have to only lose one game down the stretch. And to be a 9-win team, which I think is going to be the minimum for the Cleveland Browns to make the playoffs, they would have to only lose 2 games down the stretch. And it would really be beneficial if the only 2 games they lost were against NFC opponents. And I don't think they have 2 NFC games left. They do not. So this is an interesting thing to think about with the Cleveland Browns, because they have a chance. Now, let's look at their schedule to further break this down and talk about if the Browns could make the playoffs and what that would look like, and if you should still hope that they do. Let's look at it. Browns play the Chargers next week. Now, the Chargers are not a bad team. They are a good team. They are a team that's certainly capable of beating the Browns. The Browns are, depending if they play like they did against Baltimore, certainly capable of beating the Chargers. Then they get a bye week. Now, I think the lineup of these 2 weeks is going to be important because Denzel Ward is currently in concussion protocol. He's not likely to play this week versus the Chargers. Denzel Ward being out, and also JOK being out, you would guess. Now, there's a chance he could play because we don't know what the nature of his injury is, but let's just assume JOK is out. That's going to be stuff that really hurts your ability to pass rush and your ability to cover. But the Chargers don't throw the ball often. They run the Greg Roman offense. The Browns are very familiar with how to defend the Greg Roman offense. And then you get the bye week. Now, you would hope by that bye week you can get some of the guys that are hurt back, and then you play the Saints. I think we all feel like the Browns could beat the Saints, right? So you're looking at those 2 weeks. If the Browns can get 2 wins in a row here after the bye, they'd be sitting at 4-6, and they'd be in a better spot. Now you get to the Thursday night football game, right? You play the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's going to be a tough game. Pittsburgh's a good team. I think they're good. You're going to be a good team. But the thing is that this is a Thursday night football game at home. Historically, the home team has an advantage on Thursday night football. If the Browns are playing significantly better football by the time they get there than they have to their first 7 weeks of the season, they have a chance to beat Pittsburgh at home, most certainly. Then they play the Denver Broncos on the road. That will be an interesting game. The Broncos have a good record, but I'm not convinced that they are as good as that record says they are. But that's a game you play on Monday Night Football. That'd be interesting. You swing right back and you play Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. Now, the Browns have not won this game in a very long time, in the regular season at least. I think Tim Couch was the quarterback the last time the Browns won in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the regular season. So that game is always tough. Kansas City, we could talk about how vulnerable Kansas City is, but they're very hard to beat. So you're looking at those 2 games and you're thinking to yourself, hey, the Browns could go on a run, right? They could go and get their record up from 2-6 to 3-6 to 4-6 to 5-6 to 6-6 by December 8th. They could be 500. It's not crazy to think that this team is 500. And if they're 500, they're probably going to be really in striking range for a playoff spot. And then they have these 2 games. Now, remember, the Browns can win out and be an 11-win team. They can lose 1 game and be a 10-win team, and they can lose 2 games and become a 9-win team. This is where tiebreakers help you, because if you do lose these 2 games, which I don't think you're going to beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh this year. I don't think you're going to beat Kansas City. You still have a chance as long as you can win these next 3. And the next 3 are winnable because of the circumstance of it. Cincinnati Bengals, Thursday night football game. The Bengals beat you once here, but I don't think the Bengals are that good of a team. I think you could beat them on the road. The Miami Dolphins are definitely a beatable team. And the Baltimore Ravens, who are beatable, the Browns beat them already. But keep in mind, it's a Week 18 game. I think Baltimore, by this point in the season, is either going to be set in their wild card spot or have the division locked up. There's a chance that they don't have to play their starters in this game. So if you look at the Cleveland Browns season and you want the Browns to have the best outcome possible, I think that best outcome is maybe there's a world where you get super lucky and get 10 wins, but like the most likely positive outcome you can hope for is like 9 wins and hope that the tiebreakers swing your way. Now, if you do get to 9 wins this way, let's just think about what that conference record would be, right? So let's get back to the schedule here. If you do get here, the Browns already have a 2-2 conference record. They will have a 3-2 conference record after beating the Chargers, a 4-2 conference record after winning that home Thursday night football game, a 5-2 conference record after beating the Denver Broncos. Now, they would go all the way from 5-2 to 5-4. But then if they pick up these next 3 wins, they'd have a 8-4 conference record. Now, what would an 8-4 conference record get you? What does that look like compared to other years where teams make the playoffs? Well, it's important, right? Pittsburgh last year had a 7-5 conference record. They snuck into the playoffs. The Miami Dolphins had a 7-5 conference record. They got into the playoffs. The Browns had an 8-4 conference record. They got into the playoffs. The teams last year, the NFC wasn't super strong. A 9-win team got in. Actually, 2 9-win teams got in because also the winner of the NFC South had 9 wins last year, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, if we go and zoom back to 2024, another thing to keep in mind is who you would have to climb over right now to get into the wild card. Your Cleveland Browns, the teams that are over you on the wild card are Miami, Cincinnati, and the LA Chargers. How do you get tiebreaker victories over them? You also have the Denver Broncos and whoever comes out the AFC North, right? Or whoever doesn't come out the AFC North. You would have to have a tiebreaker over them. Well, let's look at it right now. The Browns have not played the Steelers yet, so they have no tiebreaker there. The Chiefs are projected to win the AFC West, so there is no tiebreaker really to worry about there. The Buffalo Bills are projected to win the AFC East, so there's no tiebreaker to win there. The AFC North is probably the only toss-up division right now. Pittsburgh could win it. Baltimore could win it. Browns have not played Pittsburgh, so there is no tiebreaker implication there yet. But the Browns have played Baltimore. So the fact that the Browns have already beaten Baltimore means that it's either going to be the Browns get the head-to-head tiebreaker over Baltimore and automatically catapult them no matter if they have the same record, or the Browns get to have this tiebreaker default to the conference record or in-division record for them, right? And again, for the Browns to get to 9 wins, they would have to have a pretty spectacular division record. So that would probably lean in their favor. The LA Chargers, if the Browns want to get to 9 wins, starts next week. You got to beat the Chargers, right? If you beat the Chargers, then it's a conversation that's really worth having, because all of a sudden, if you get the same win total as the Chargers, you jump them. You have the head-to-head victory. And if it's not that, then you also get the conference tiebreaker, so on and so forth. Cincinnati Bengals, same exact thing I mentioned with the Baltimore, well, not with the Baltimore Ravens, but with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Browns get a chance to play them. If they can split that series with them, then it defaults to other tiebreakers that they're likely to be ahead of, because the Cincinnati Bengals currently have a 1-3 conference record. The Miami Dolphins, same thing. The Browns get a head-to-head opportunity. So if the Browns do win most of these games down the stretch, they will be in a good position to win tiebreakers. And if there is going to be a 9-win team that gets in, even if they lose to Kansas City and even if they lose that Pittsburgh game at home, there is still a chance that they could sneak in with 9 wins and make the playoffs. So I just wanted to kind of talk that through, because Juan Thornhill bringing that up was interesting. Now, again, it's going to take a lot, and it's not something that we could just expect at this point, right? Like, I would say the time to get excited about this would be if the Browns win the next 3 games. Browns win their next 3 games, or if they come out that Monday Night Football game victorious and they get to 500 again, right? That's what I'll say. If the Browns get back to 500 by December 8th and they're going into Pittsburgh to play Pittsburgh, then it's time to start to get reasonably excited at the chances that the Browns could make the playoffs. Right now, I would say it's a bit premature, but if they get these next 5 weeks, 4 games in 5 weeks, and they have a couple of, like, this is a very fortunate stretch here for them because, look, they get a bye week and then a mini bye right after that. So they're going to be well rested going into this December stretch. If they can win pretty much until December 8th, which is tough because this team has 2 wins right now, then yeah, then it would be time to get excited because Juan Thornhill is right. The Browns do have those tiebreakers. It's something I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you think. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.